Hi, this is Perry Marshall, and I'm speaking in Milan Performance Strategies in Italy. And as a preparation for that seminar, I want to show you a few things that I think are really interesting and really powerful and will change the way that you look at everything in your business. So, my good friend and colleague Richard Koch has this thing called the STAR principle. And the STAR principle says that you want to be the number one player in a growing market, and that the number one player in a growing market is going to experience almost all of the growth, all the profitability, almost all the earnings, and everybody else is going to fight for the scraps. Okay? And in his book, Star Principle, he goes on an extensive tour of businesses, and he really shows you that this is true, and it's very powerful. Well, when I read Richard's book, I realized that, hey, wait a minute. I've seen this all my life. This describes every success story I've been involved in my career, and it's fractal, okay? Well, so what do we mean by the word fractal? A fractal is a pattern inside a pattern, inside a pattern, inside a pattern, where the pattern keeps repeating, whether you're zooming out or zooming in, whether you're looking at macro or micro. So for example, outside my window, there's a tree. I can zoom in. I can look at the whole tree. I can zoom in, and there's still a branching pattern. I can zoom in down to the twigs and branches, still a branching pattern. I can zoom down to the leaves and the veins inside the leaves that feed the cells. I can zoom, 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 and I just keep seeing that same pattern all over again. Well, 80-20 is a fractal pattern. 80-20 is true at every level and on every scale. So you can be talking about the income level of people in the entire world, or you can just look at the top 10 people in the Forbes 400, and 80-20 is still true. It's really remarkable. It's very consistent. Well, STAR principle is fractal too. And what that means is STAR principle applies not only for big giant corporations, it also applies to tiny things like Google ads. Okay, so when I first started advertising on Google, which was in 2002, it was just a few weeks after the Google AdWords system came out, I started to see that there were certain patterns of how you actually make this thing work. And one of the things is called peel and stick. Okay, and peel and stick says that if you have a group of keywords, so maybe it's like how to write a book, how to write a children's book, how to write a men's book, how to write a motivational book, how to write a, fill in the blank, like maybe all these different minor variations. Well, you put them all together in an ad group and you write an ad, but one of them might stand out in some way. Like maybe it has lower click-through rates than all of your other ads. Maybe your write a children's book keyword has lower click-through rates. And so what you do is you peel it out, you stick it in a different ad group all by itself, and you write a different ad that matches just that keyword, and all of a sudden the performance will go way up. Okay, well, peel and stick is an application of STAR principle, because STAR principle says if you're not number one in a growing market, then you need to go to a market next door that has no defined leader. Okay, so maybe there's already a leader of how to write a book, but there's nobody who's written a how to write a children's book course. Okay, so you peel how to write a children's book out, you stick it in a new campaign, and you build a whole entire marketing campaign just around that. And if you're the first one to do it, then you're the de facto leader of that market, and you're the incumbent, and now everybody else has to compete with you. And so, and this worked very well. And I've been teaching this now for 16 years, and this is a major, major, major way that you succeed with Google AdWords is peel and stick. Well, it's true just on one microscopic keyword. So I'm sure the keyword how to write a children's book is a very, very small market. Maybe it has, I don't know, a few hundred searches a month, but it is a market, and star principle applies. And if you want to be king of that tiny little market, then that's way easier than going into a giant swamp full of alligators and trying to fight with the big boys. And this is, in fact, is how you succeed in business. This is how you succeed on any level whatsoever. And so star principle ends up being one of the most important concepts that there is. Now, I'll leave you with one last thought. I was consulting with a client who sold a fairly commoditized product where you could go on Google Shopping and you could find 2 or 3 or 4 or 6 or 8 other companies that were selling something very similar. And she was really struggling to get good traffic and to get good click-through rates and to buy traffic at acceptable prices. That will always be the case. And I said, what you have to do is you have to make a pivot. You have to do a peel and stick where there's some part of this market where nobody is providing an adequate solution, and I give them a product that solves that particular problem. Kind of like nobody's got a how to write a children's book thing. There's other how to write a book things, but not for children. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to do that. And this is a huge application of 80-20 because 80-20 says that the spoils are going to be divided up like this. Okay? So do you want to be here or here or here or here or here? Okay? I mean, look how much distance there is between number 1 and number 2. And this is how all markets stack up. So you do a Google search, and there's the first paid listing, the second paid listing, the third paid listing, the fourth paid listing, okay? The traffic that goes to these different listings stacks up like this, okay? So in general, now on Google AdWords, it all depends on the situation, but as a broad generality, you want to be number 1 because number 1 takes the spoils and everybody else does fight over the scraps. You want to be able to legitimately be number 1. And if you can afford to pay more for a click than anybody else, and if your product has a distinct USP and you are a star in your market where you're number 1 in a growing market, you're almost bound to make money. And you're actually in a comfortable, you're almost following the slipstream of the marketplace. And it's really actually quite easy to do. It's much easier to be number 1 than it is to be any of these other guys. And if you're like duking it out with all these other people because you're number 6 or you're number 4 or you're number 5, man, that sucks. And it doesn't get better just by clawing your way to the top harder. You need to pivot, and you do it with peel and stick. And it's true on Google AdWords. It's true within a whole entire marketplace, and it's true of Fortune 500 companies.